It amazes me that this would be a controversial thing to say when it's an objective fact, but the Star Wars prequel trilogy absolutely, unequivocally sucks. It is awful. When it is used by filmmakers in colleges to point out what you should not do as a filmmaker, that's when you know you've really donked up.
You blew it, man!
However, one thing that's really interested me for the longest time, and I'm kind of surprised I haven't done a video on this yet, is the criticism that Rey Skywalker, or as she should really be called, Rey Palpatine, is a self-insert character for Kathleen Kennedy. Now, this whole argument was revived with The Dial of Destiny, where we have Helena Shaw basically as just a snarkier, worse version of Rey, but in almost every other capacity is exactly the same. And people were saying Helena Shaw is also a self-insert for Kathleen Kennedy. And so I decided to go on a little quest to find out if this is really true and to uncover whether or not self-insert characters are actually all that bad. I mean, if you've read fan fiction, they're usually really bad, but is that the way that it's supposed to be? Hi there everyone, Lars here from Camille's Harem, not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers, because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And the honest answer to whether or not Rey Skywalker and Helena Shaw are self-insert characters of Kathleen Kennedy, well, the answer might really shock you, and yet at the same time, not really. From a traditional standpoint of a self-insert character, a writer decides to put themselves into the story as a character, whether exactly like themselves, or they create an idealized version of themselves, or they create a monstrosity of themselves because they're self-loathing. That last variation of a self-insert character usually doesn't happen, but it can happen. I have found some disgusting things in fan fiction. Yeesh. But for the most part, most people who do self-inserts decide to put an idealized version of themselves into these stories. Well, here's the thing. Kathleen Kennedy herself did not write any of the scripts for the Star Wars sequel trilogy, nor did she write the script for The Dial of Destiny. She did not. Therefore, by the most strictest forms of the term, Rey Skywalker, or Rey Palpatine, and Helena Shaw are not self-insert characters, because Kathleen Kennedy did not directly write them. However, that does not mean that they are not self-insert characters. You see, if we are to rely on the insider information that comes out of podcasts and YouTube channels such as Midnight's Edge or Call Me Chado, where we get some really excellent insights into the worlds of production and writing within Hollywood, one of the things that we've learned from retired producers and from active writers still within Hollywood is this: that there is a growing trend amongst producers, of which Kathleen Kennedy is most certainly a producer, where they think that they are fantastic storytellers. Ha-ha! And yet they are the worst kind of storytellers imaginable. The kind of storytellers that all of us at one point have dreamed of being, and that is this: I speak an idea into existence, and it just magically comes about. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves right here. How many of us writers have not had that dream at some point where you're just like, I have this glorious idea for a story, but I'm either too tired, do not have enough time, or I'm working on too many other projects, or I just don't know exactly how I should write this story, that I don't know if I could ever make it come into being. I don't know if I can write it, but it's this fantastic idea and I want it to become realized. Wouldn't it just be great if I could just push a button and then boom, my story comes into being perfectly the way I imagined it? Oh, wouldn't that just be so nice? The thing is this, is that producers have, weirdly enough, that kind of an ability, where all they have to do is press a couple of buttons, call up some directors, and be like, I have a story idea and I want you to make it. Here are tens of millions of dollars to make it happen. Or in the case of Disney and Lucasfilm, here's hundreds of millions of dollars to make it happen. You are going to take this obscure idea that I have in my head and you are going to make it happen. And so the producers rely on actual filmmakers and writers to take the vague ideas and notes that they give them and create this complete story that is supposed to be exactly as the producer envisioned it. This is honestly a really bad way of doing movies. It's a really bad way of telling stories because you can't expect someone else to tell the story that is in your head. And I've had a number of people reach out to me and be like, Lars, you're such a great writer and you're such a fun YouTuber. You should make my story. I'm like, no, you need to write your story. I'm busy doing my own stuff and I don't know what's in your head. It will never be what you want it to be. And there's an entire conversation to be had around that, believe you me. But in any case, so this is a bad trend now with modern day producers. Rather than letting writers, directors, and actors really have their say and come together to create amazing stories, the producers are dictating a vague dream or idea that they wish to become reality. Now, there's plenty of reports, plenty of evidence that says that Kathleen Kennedy actually never really got involved in the efforts to do the Star Wars sequel trilogy. She was far more involved in the Dial of Destiny, but once again, she never sat down to help write the script. But there are plenty of reports that she did dictate exactly what kind of characters would be in the story and what those characters were supposed to do. And that is where we can confirm that Rey and Helena are indeed self-inserts for Kathleen Kennedy, because these are characters that Kathleen Kennedy demanded be created. The fantastic and glorious Wonder Rey and the brilliant Mary Sue Helena Shaw are indeed creations of Kathleen Kennedy. They are exactly what she wanted them to be, and they were put into the story. They are the self-insert characters of Kathleen Kennedy, though not done in the traditional way that people think about them. Now then, the Star Wars sequel trilogy and the Dial of Destiny have proven themselves in many different ways to be horrible stories, and there's no reason for me to create a half-hour-long video describing why, when there's already so many other wonderful videos that have broken down the myriad ways in which these stories suck. However, like I said at the beginning of this video, I want to talk about, are self-insert characters inherently bad? Is there not something else that we can learn about them, that we could do with them? Well, here is my contention, that self-insert characters can actually be really good. I will bring up one of the most famous self-insert characters of all time, and that is Sherlock Holmes. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was absolutely infamous for playing tricks on people, for pulling pranks, all to prove just how brilliant he was. And honestly, this guy was really smart. He was a massive intellectual with a lot of personality to go with him. And this guy always wanted people to know that he was indeed the smartest and that he was indeed in control. And so we actually see a lot of that in the Sherlock Holmes series. However, rather than being all like, well, I, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, am the most wonderful person in the room and I'm so intelligent, let me put my Mary Sue into this book, he puts in Sherlock Holmes, who some people might argue at face value that Sherlock Holmes comes across as a Mary Sue because he's just so brilliant and so capable. But actually, when we look at Sherlock Holmes as an individual, he is almost everything that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was not. He was reclusive, with very few friends, had a drug problem. These are things that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle did not labor under. So, in a very interesting way, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote himself into the Sherlock Holmes series as a more flawed individual than he saw himself. Now, that's a little bit of narcissism on his side, but it makes actually for a very interesting character. To take someone who is genuinely intelligent and highly capable and give them certain weaknesses that make them really not a part of society, and that there's certain things that they have to overcome, and that's one of the things that actually brings out the wonderful dynamic between Sherlock and Watson. So, in my opinion, the Sherlock Holmes series is a really great example of a good self-insert character and what can be done with that character to bolster up the story. I think another really interesting example is Stephen King's Dark Tower series, where he puts himself multiple times into the story through various dimensions and worlds, where the characters can actually meet their creator, Stephen King, and all kinds of shenanigans can come about from it. Either he's someone who's really helpful, he's actually killed himself in that series, or sometimes he's not very helpful at all, depending on the version of Stephen King that the character is on into. It's a fun bit of meta commentary, and if you're a big fan of Stephen King, it probably works for you. If you're not a fan of Stephen King, then again, you might look at this as just plain old narcissism. But if we actually turn back to Star Wars and have a look at another very famous self-insert character, Luke Skywalker, I think we get a much fuller picture of what can be done. Yes, George Lucas is putting himself in as the hero of his own story, the everyman, the every kid in Luke, the farmer who goes out on this adventure and discovers great powers, discovers the heroism in himself, discovers this grand destiny, and goes on to become the hero of the galaxy. And that's a story that a lot of people, boys and girls, want to enjoy. They want to be able to see themselves in this character. And I think that's one of the things that makes Luke so interesting, is that he is a character who is not a Mary Sue like Rey Palpatine or Helena Shaw. He is someone who has to learn and grow along the way. He is someone who makes plenty of mistakes, and those mistakes have some pretty bad consequences in the long run. For crying out loud, he loses his hand. He almost falls to the dark side. He gets kissed by his sister? Yeesh. But he's also someone who learns how to use the Force, learns to overcome his mistakes, learns to overcome his weaknesses in order to become this great Jedi Knight and hero. He's someone who learns to set aside his own pride and becomes friends with people who, when he first meets them, they don't exactly get along, which then leads to a fantastic relationship with him, Han, and Leia, as well as Chewie and the droids and all these other characters. And so we get to see Luke grow as an individual. There's a lot that people can identify with when it comes to Luke. So even if you know that Luke Skywalker is George Lucas's self-insert, the thing is that this is again a self-insert character who is given weaknesses, who isn't made to just kind of be this glorified vessel through which the writer can live through vicariously, but is instead their own person with their own character arc that complements the overall plot of the story. And to be fair, all writers put little bits of themselves into the characters they write, either the things that they despise about themselves, the things that they love about themselves, or the things that they wish that they could be. And that's just natural. So in a way, we put ourselves into all of our characters. The question is, do we have a self-insert character that is quite clearly us? And I'd say that if you decide to go that route, then go the Luke Skywalker or Sherlock Holmes route, where you really want to explore who you might be if put into a different situation and given certain advantages and disadvantages. And really treat yourself as just any other character within the plot, and you can have a whole lot of fun, and hopefully that is well received by the audience. Though probably better yet is just to create your own original characters and have fun with them. So those are my thoughts on self-insert characters. There's definitely a larger conversation to be had around this particular topic, but let this be the beginning of it. And yes, Rey Palpatine and Helena Shaw are most definitely self-insert characters. They're bad self-insert characters. And also, they represent, I think, a growing trend within mainstream storytelling that is really bad, in which people are dictating to others what they should write, and they are blending the worst of creativity to create the blandest of stories and the worst of characters. And this is one of the reasons why I think that people are not going to the cinema as much as they once used to, and also why we're seeing not as many books sold. It's not just that people are growing bored with stories, but people are growing sick and bored of bad stories, and these bad stories are on the rise because of the laziness of people in control who want to take the easy route to get stories done, and writers for a quick buck are taking on these jobs and creating awful stories to satisfy someone in a place of power so that way they can live vicariously through this fantasy And that doesn't satisfy anyone other than the one person who wanted the story written, and it wasn't even written by them. It was written by someone else, and therefore the vision was never appropriately developed or discovered. So those are my thoughts, again, on self-insert characters and where we're going with all of this. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. In the meantime, if you're looking for more writing advice, more writing insight here on YouTube, then please check out our other videos here. You can also head on over to our podcast, Camille's Harem. And if you would like to support us, please like, comment, share, subscribe if you haven't already done so. But we would especially love it if you check out some of the books that we ourselves have published. Links for them are in the description below. Thank you for joining us on this adventure that we call writing. And until the next video, y'all, tschüss.